Today is June 20, 2014, the 171st day of the year. There are 194 days remaining until the end of 2014. Sunrise today is at 5:06 a.m. The sun sets at 8:38 p.m. Length of daylight hours today is 15 hours, 31 minutes, 17 seconds. Today is 5 seconds longer than yesterday. Tomorrow will be 1 second longer than today. The last quarter moon, 23 days old, rises with 42% illumination at 12:57 a.m. today and sets at 1:58 p.m., passing above Rutland City at 234,295 miles distant from the center of planet Earth within the first zodiacal designation, Aries, the Ram. Saturday marks summer solstice and is the day of the year when the sun is above the visible horizon longest, providing the most daylight in the northern hemisphere and the fewest hours of daylight in the southern hemisphere. Summer solstice occurs when the tilt of the planetary semi-axis is most inclined toward the sun, which appears at that moment at its highest spatial relationship to the horizon. In this part of the world, that moment occurs at 6:51 a.m. Saturday, and the season we call summer 2014 begins, prevailing for the next 90 days until the autumnal equinox in September. At noon, look for the sun directly overhead. On this day in 1945, the United States Secretary of State approves the transfer of Wernher von Braun and his team of Nazi scientists to America. In amateur movies made of von Braun during his brief denazification internment in this country, he's a smiling, cigarette-smoking, well-fed young Nazi scientist, a golden boy who's just lived a boy's dream. The Third Reich gives him every resource he needs to design and build working rocket ships, the V-1 and V-2 series, which can be packed with high explosives, launched, stabilized, and guided remotely toward targets in England, the first successful guided missiles. By his mid-20s, young Werner is technical director of the Wehrmacht Rocket Center at Peenemünde on the Baltic Sea. He joins the Nazi Party and wears a swastika pin on his lapel because he's a go-along, get-along team player who wants to travel to the moon someday. In 1952, von Braun writes that totalitarianism had been good for him. Not so good for the Londoners blown up or terrorized by the rain of ballistic missiles he sends their way, nor the slave laborers at Peenemünde, some 20,000 of whom die from illnesses, beatings, hangings, and intolerable working conditions within the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp. It said more people died building the V-2 series than are actually killed during its deployment. With the Soviets less than 100 miles away from Peenemünde and Allied forces advancing deep into Germany in the spring of 1945, the Nazi High Command orders the scientists to join the Wehrmacht and fight. Von Braun decides it's time to make a move. He flees on a bicycle with his brother Magnus. Young Werner and Magnus approach a U.S. Army private. They meet on the road. "My name is Magnus von Braun. This is my brother. He invented the V-2. We want to surrender." In 1946, working at Fort Bliss in Texas, Wernher von Braun is interviewed by a local newspaper reporter. He complains about the quality of the food on the base. In 1942, on this day in World War II, a Japanese submarine surfaces near the Columbia River in Oregon, firing 17 shells at nearby Fort Stevens in one of only a handful of attacks by Japan against the United States mainland. On this day in 1972, the Tallahatchie Bridge in Money, Mississippi, made famous in Bobby Gentry's Ode to Billy Joe, collapses after being set on fire by vandals. Later, the bridge is rebuilt. It's from this bridge that the song's narrator, along with her boyfriend, drop a mysterious object, a ring, a dead baby, into the waters of the Tallahatchie River at Money, some 10 miles from Greenwood, Mississippi. The Tallahatchie at Money is where the body of Emmett Till, 14, an African-American young man, is found 3 days after his abduction on August 28, 1955, tortured and murdered. 12 years later, the white boy in the song, Billy Joe McAllister, jumps off the bridge, presumably to his death, although the bridge surface is only 20 feet above the river and the water, placidly flowing, is deep enough to avoid any serious injury. The song is number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in summer 1967. Born this week, 1951, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Egyptian terrorist, second leader of al-Qaeda after the late unlamented Osama bin Laden. In 2012, al-Zawahiri suggests that Muslims could make a little money on the side, or at least get some practice target shooting by kidnapping Americans in Muslim countries abroad. He's still got a $25 million price on his head. Presumably not the best time to invite him over for sponge cake and fruit punch or a few rounds of pin the tail on the terrorist. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "And so with the sunshine and the great bursts of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow in fast movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer." From Rutland, Vermont, this is Richard Alcott speaking.